17, beginning at the 11th verse. It happened that as he made his way toward Jerusalem, Jesus crossed over the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 men, all lepers, met him. They kept their distance but raised their voices, calling out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." Taking a good look at them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priest." They went, and while still on their way, became clean. One of them, when he realized that he was healed, turned around and came back, shouting his gratitude, glorifying God. He kneeled at Jesus' feet, so grateful. He couldn't thank him enough, and he was a Samaritan. Jesus said, "Were not 10 healed? Where are the 9? Can none be found to come back and give glory to God except this outsider?" Then he said to him, "Get up, on your way. Your faith has healed you." The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. In the name of God, of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. So we've been in this series of working through the big picture, which is really understanding what it means for us to live into the image of God. And so the first couple times we talked about our understanding of who God is and how we think about God changes the way that we relate to who God is. If we think God is an ogre, then we're not going to be looking to spend much time with him. We're going to be running the other way. But if we think that God is here for us as a support and a source of power for us and love, then we're going to run to him. So the way we think about God matters. And so then we spent a couple of weeks talking about what it means for us to be made in the image of God, and exploring living into that image. And so now we're going to be talking about what it means for us to be made in the image of God, what it means for us to be made in the image of God, the implications for that. And all along the way, we're taking our key from Jesus, because Jesus is constantly in a battle to challenge our thoughts about who God is and who he is. And ultimately, because of changing those thoughts, our understanding of who we are and how we live. So we're coming to this place of understanding now who we are as people who are made in the image of God. Isn't it mysterious? One of the mysterious things in the Bible, there are lots of mysterious things in the Bible, but one of the mysterious things in the Bible for me is back in Genesis, when it talks about God creating humankind. And God says to himself, he says, "Let us create humankind in our image." Let us create humankind in our image. What does that mean? I mean, I talk to myself all the time, but I don't, maybe is God doing that? But what does it mean for God to say, let us make humankind in our image? Scholars are very divided in all kinds of different opinions, but I can tell you kind of where my heart sits, that it's this first inkling of this three-person God that later on we're able to identify as the doctrine of the Trinity. So if you've gone through confirmation class and gone through discussions about the doctrine of the Trinity, it just kind of it hurts your brain. It's painful trying to figure out how do you understand all of this. So maybe that's a sign that we get it wrong, because the Trinity is not simply a doctrine. The Trinity is a living being. One God, 3 persons who live in relationship with one another. And so how does that work? Well, so let's just do this little mind exercise here. So go back to before today. Go back to before you were born. Go back to before the United States was a country. Go back to before the world existed. Go back to before the universe existed. Go back to before the Big Bang. Who was? God was, right? God was. And so what was God doing for all of that time? Well, was he just bored? I mean, it was before toys. It was before TV and football. So what's God doing? I mean, using his time. I mean, no computers, no internet. What was God doing? Well, for one thing, God wasn't alone. So 3 persons in the Trinity. And so this first person, in terms of the relationship, this first person that we call the Father, who begets for all eternity, not at a moment, but for all eternity, this process of begetting the Son. So the Son it's hard for us, especially if you're a mom and you gave birth. I can't imagine what it would mean for you to be continually begetting, a baby. It just kind of like takes some. It always feels like it's forever, right? At least that's what my wife says. But God the Father is in an eternal relationship, always begetting the Son. So there is this fount of relationship in the Father that is flowing out into this Son of his, who then he makes available to the world. But then as he begets the Son, what proceeds from these two is the Spirit coming from the two of them. And so there's this creative movement that happens of the Father begetting the Son. So all of who the Father is invested in pouring out love and creative energy and seeing his Son continually being birthed into being for all eternity, and then the two of them by the power of the Spirit proceeding from them, this creative love and energy that sweeps around and through and behind and supporting and being with them, this movement between them of mutual admiration, mutual desire, creative love, this desire constantly to be together, the desire constantly to lift up one another, to serve one another, to be together with one another. So they don't create because they got nothing else to do. They don't create because they're bored or somehow incomplete. They create because it comes out of this fountain of this movement of grace and glory and mercy, this tremendous creative love that wants to give itself for all eternity. The technical word, theological word for this relationship between the persons of the Trinity is perichoresis. Perichoresis. You can write that down and maybe win Jeopardy someday. Perichoresis, choresis coming from the word like to move, like choreograph, to choreograph play or a dance. And then para meaning around, like the perimeter of a circle. And so perichoresis means to move around one another. And so these persons of the Trinity moving around in this tremendous, creative, love-filled, joyful dance for all eternity that overflows then into the process of creation. It is made in the image of God that we are. When we talk about being made in God's image, it means to be stamped with that 3-person God, yearning to be in relationship. We were created for relationship. We were created to be together in his name, to have him working in, through, and around us, inviting us to be in relationship. You know, it is impossible for us to be alone. When you're all by yourself, you are still never alone. There is no sin that you've ever committed that affected only you. There is no blessing you've ever given that reflected only you. One of the most cruel punishments, I think, in human institutions is solitary confinement, where you take somebody and you lock them in a room all by themselves and you just give them bread and water for the rest of their days, cut off from a relationship. But even they are not alone. We are never alone. Although oftentimes, if you're like me, we lose perspective, don't we? And forget that we have these relationships. But they undergird who we are and this yearning inside of us. And yet, we would say that oftentimes our being together, our being in community is not always joyous, joy-filled, happy time. No, not always. Because we live in this very broken world. And so oftentimes we come together in community, but oftentimes it's not particularly wonderful. Jean-Paul Sartre, the famous French philosopher and playwright, wrote a poem or a play about hell, and in it he said, "Hell is other people." And that's true. I think that's true. That's true. And so we do have that experience in this world that being in community is not necessarily a blessing experience. It can be a cursed experience. So we have a great example in the gospel lesson for today. 10 men who are lepers, who are banded together in their misery. So 10 men who are experienced. So just to kind of go through your head, the tremendous physical anomaly of having your flesh essentially rot, to lose the nerve endings, and so for your flesh not to be able to feel it, and so the physical destruction that happens because of it, the social ostracism that happens, and so not being able to be with your family or friends, and so you're cast away from them, and so you can't get close to anybody. That's why in the gospel they have to cry from a distance. They have to cry, "Unclean, unclean." And so can you imagine what it's like to go to kind of a public place because you're scrounging for food because nobody's giving you any food. You can't work. So you're trying to get food, and a mom sees you with her kids, and she looks at you in horror and grabs her kids and runs the other way. And then in your experience, you just say, well, how could life possibly get worse? I'm shunned from society. I'm with all of these other people who are going through exactly the same horrible stuff. And how could God let this happen to me? So am I just cursed of God? I can't go to church. I can't go to the temple. I'm alone, except with all of these other people. It's an awful thing to be together in community when awful things are a part of our life, and yet that's sometimes how we live. Why is it then that when they hear that Jesus is coming, that they cry out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us"? Why do they do that? Because there's this dynamic that says when we're miserable, when things are awful, and when we're just kind of with other people who are miserable and awful, and we concentrate and we focus on the things that are miserable and awful, and there's no hope, there's no promise, there's no love, there's nothing out there in the future for me, then why? Just why even do that? Why even go through the pain of building some kind of expectation that things can be different? Oh, no, it's much better for us to come together. We could do an experiment here. If we handed out like notebooks, to each one of us, right? And then maybe we'll get together in groups of 10. And then the assignment is going to be, I would like you to spend all of the next week coming up with a list of all of the things that are bad about your life or the world. All right? So can we do that? So we'll bring in notebooks and just we want you to kind of dwell on all of the things that are hopeless and bad. I'm not sensing a lot of enthusiasm about my project here, because you can feel how spiraling and ugly that could be. So why then do these 10 decide not to do that? But there is something in them, some spark in them, some little flame in them that leads them to want to cry out and to be able to say, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Some little thing in them that says, maybe the way things have been isn't the way things have to be. Maybe the past is not the indicator of the future. Maybe the way that we've experienced things isn't the way that we need to continue to stay. But if we cry out for help, things could be different. What is that spark in them that causes them to cry out? What is that spark in you that as you look around and look at all of the crappy stuff in your life, all of the stuff that's coming over the TV, all of the news, all of the stuff that people are saying to you, all of that stuff, what is it in you that cries out this little flame, this little incipient flicker of faith and hope that says, Jesus, have mercy on us. Can you help? You know, we're never alone. God never leaves us alone. We are always in community with him. And so never do we feel that flicker inside of us. Never do we cry out for him. Never that he doesn't hear us and respond to us. And so he says, go show yourself to the priest. And as you go, you'll be made clean. And so out of faith, they turn around, 10 guys, and start to make their way to show themselves to the priest. And lo and behold, now you got to use your imagination here. What would that be like? All of a sudden, my fingers, my hands, your face, your ears, all of a sudden things begin to be whole, healed, different. And all of a sudden what was just a flicker becomes now a questioning, and then all of a sudden just this absolute surge of joy, of like, I can't believe that this could happen to me. And so then not just walking, but running. You know, your family that you've been separated from for so long, and all of a sudden you get to go back. Honey, I'm home. I'm going to cook dinner tonight, right? So all of a sudden, this opportunity for a great, wonderful new life you never knew was even going to be possible except for just this little bit of hope and faith. And then 9 of them do that. 1 turns around and he comes back and he throws himself back down at the feet of Jesus and says, thank you. Thank you. With tears, with joy, throws himself down and says, thank you to Jesus. And Jesus, so now this is the point of the entire sermon. This one is coming right here. This is it. So if you get this, you got it. So the question is, why does Jesus say the next thing? So the guy comes and he says, thank you to Jesus. And the other 9 are gone. And Jesus says, so I'm so glad you came back. And then he says, so where are the other 9? Why does Jesus say that? What's the attitude with which he says it? I can tell you how I read the passage and how I hear it, at least initially, naturally. When I was a little kid, and my grandmother gave me a cookie, I would go away happy with the cookie, and my mom would grab me and say, no, no, no. You don't just go eat the cookie. You go back to grandma and you say, thank you. Tell her thank you, right? And so I have this thing in my head that it's polite to say thank you, that you're supposed to say thank you, right? It's a norm. It's a rule that we're supposed to abide by. If you don't say thank you, you've somehow missed an important thing here, right? And so if we grow up, then we hear this thing. If we don't say thank you, then somehow we've been we haven't done it right. And so this phrase of Jesus, where are the other 9, can feel like a hand slap on the other 9. They didn't do it right. Their mothers didn't raise them right. So they're bad. Thank you that you at least got it. And these other ones, they'll learn. I don't know. So Jesus could have said, you get to keep your healing. Those other 9, leprosy! You ungrateful wretches, you. But he doesn't do that. So what's the dynamic here? He says, I'm so glad that you came back. But where are the other 9? Where are the other 9? Because it's not just about a healing, but it's about a relationship. It's about being together in this dance of love. It's like, so when I was a kid, we grew up with dogs. And this is how it's supposed to happen. So you got a dog and you got a ball. And so you got the dog and you throw the ball and the dog runs after the ball and he's supposed to bring it back to you, right? And so that makes a game. It closes the loop. And so you pick up the ball, you throw it again, the dog gets it, brings it back. It's fun, right? It's kind of, you can spend all afternoon doing that. Oh, my dog never did that. I would throw the ball, the dog would go get the ball, and then he would go running off with it. It's like, bring the ball back. Where'd you go? He'd be out there eating the ball. And we could have been playing all afternoon. Where's the other 9? Where's the other 9? We would have had enough for a whole ball game. And they didn't come back. I'm really glad for the healing. I'm glad that you can go back to your families and friends. But there's so much. There's so much for us. And so this opportunity, this invitation that Jesus has for us to be in relationship with him. And the doorway to that relationship is gratitude. It's thanksgiving. It's coming back to him to say thank you so that he can open it more for us, so he can develop it, so he can show us this tremendous gift of love, this tremendous opportunity of creative energy, this tremendous joy. And it's just beginning. And so this opportunity to step in and to allow him to be able to unfold for us how it is that he supported us every step of the way. When we thought we were all alone in the dark, he was there with us. And when we think about the future and how we've hemmed ourselves in and there are no options for the future, he's there with us to open the doors, to provide opportunities and healing and creativity and energy and relationships that if it weren't for a relationship with him, we wouldn't even see. And the doorway is gratitude. He comes back, and the scripture says he comes back and he gives thanks. And the word there in Greek is Eucharisto. Eucharisto gives thanks. Eucharisto. The Eucharist. Coming back, and that's what we do as we gather. It is the symbol for what we do throughout the days of the week as we come on Sundays, reminding us that every single day is an opportunity for us to come and to give thanks to him. But to open this relationship of his creative and churning love that he offers to us every single moment of every single day, if only we just come and open our hearts in gratitude to him. It's only gratitude that opens our hearts and allows us to see the power and love in him. John Donne, the great English poet, said these words. He said, "Batter my heart, three-person God. Melt me, mold me, make me new." May that be our prayer. Batter our hearts, three-person God. Melt us, mold us, make us new. Amen. So let's stand together and affirm the faith of our hearts and of our lives by using the form of the Nicene Creed.